for me, when you said it, became in an instant sort of like mantra for me of like, this is the saying that goes above the door in the locker room. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Everyday People podcast. Today, we're going to talk about dinner with friends and give a bit of a status update, which is something that we hope to do sort of on regular intervals and keep guys up to date about what's going on with the film as we figure it out and as things happen. And, for us to be able to really do something that we're very committed to, which is sort of share the experience in a really real way about what it's like to make your independent film and to distribute it yourself, which is what we've decided to do. Um, yeah. So if we start from the beginning a little bit, like we had decided that we wanted to go in real fast to TIFF. The film wasn't done, but we submitted um, with like a rough cut, and we're lucky enough to get accepted. But it was a real sort of like race to the finish to make sure that we got the film finished in time, which was
No, it
all
was a
fine and
fine
dandy.
cut. It was a picture
Was
lock cut, actually. It was picture
was
lock.
it picture
Yeah,
lock?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. For
Um,
funding, we submitted rough cut, but it was
right,
picture
right.
lock.
It's all a
Yeah.
blur. I
Mhm.
I just I'm trying to leave it in the rearview mirror. No, that's not fair. It was fine. But all of that is to say we basically didn't really have to sit around and wait. Like we finished the film and like days later we were premiering it at one of the biggest festivals in the world. Um, and so it happened real fast in terms of there wasn't a lot of waiting around, and we really liked that. And yeah, I mean, just to sort of talk a little bit about it, like normally it wouldn't be unheard of for you to take a year, maybe even 18 months doing the full festival circuit by the time you're waiting for results and deadlines and all of the rest and the actual festivals to happen, that it easily could be that long if you're going to do a full festival circuit. And we certainly could have done that because we have so much confidence in the film. Like there's not a doubt in my mind that if we had gone that route that we would be showing it, around the world at festivals, but we chose not to do that. And do you want to talk a little bit about sort of why we didn't want to go that route?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you said, like, pretty early on, I mean, in so many ways, this film exists as a bit of a case study for us, and proof
Mm.
positive of certain things of an ethos of a school of filmmaking. And that, started from even the writing of it was intentionally written for something to be scalable that we could shoot or not, deciding to shoot it and deciding to move forward with, going to camera with $100,000 like that. It was either, if we didn't get talent to watch, we weren't guaranteed anything in post. So it was either we got talent to watch and we had this other money that had that would add to that, or we had at least $100,000, and deciding to go forward with that was, again, a case study in like, you know, can you still get, a qualified, experienced group of people to come together and make something, right? If you can make the right concessions in other ways and have a good time shooting it and not want to just forget the experience as soon as it's done. Um, so it was a case study for that, and that, proved successful. And then with distribution, it was a case study for like, yeah, we the film, while, the film is really Indian scale because of its budget, the story itself and, the what's actually happening, it's quite accessible and quite universal. And we felt that there was, yeah, like, while small in budget, there was a real commercial potential to it. Like, it felt like a kind of feel good movie, some of our favorites, The Big Chill, The Family Stone, those kinds of movies that get into like relationship dynamics and stuff like that, that we love and that a lot of people love. And we didn't necessarily think that, you know, we had TIFF in our sights, and that was our goal, to try and finish the film and like at least lock picture buy kind of thing, knowing that, we've debuted there before, have a growing relationship, and it was going to be, it's still one of the biggest festivals in the world. Often you ask people, it's like, think the top three, kind of are like Cannes, Sundance, and TIFF, right? And it was the first one that was coming up that we would have the
Yeah.
finished film for. And so we did that. And I think one of the reasons why we were like at the ready, because the film also, like I said, when we wrote it, there's a Christmassy scene in it towards the end too. And, TIFF is in September. And following that, we were really curious just about like putting something like this out around the holidays or making it available around the holidays. And the too long didn't read of it all is that all of the other ways, while successful in different degrees, weren't necessarily successful in a very important thing for us, which was starting to build an audience and a fan base for
Uh-huh.
our work specifically, right? I think across the board, a lot of filmmakers, creators, writers, producers are, it's the writing isn't even on the wall. It's definitely in the emails. Where is the audience for this thing if we're going to make it? If you want us to give you this money to do this or what have you. And then on the independent side, you can see how much more agency you have. I mean, let's be super real. If I had an audience of, 50,000 or whatever to appeal to, I could go to a lot of festivals. 50,000 people are not even, like, I'm not exposing the film to 50,000 people,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
so it was just trying to, read the lay of the land for what it is. Like, I said in that other podcast, like 2023, 2024 was a really topsy-turvy time for our industry, right? Like, you can see even some of our biggest studios, legacy networks and things are making missteps in the choices that they're making and what they're putting out and how they're treating it or how they're marketing or how they're this or that. And so, you know, ever the person to be like, obviously we know this better. Not really. We just thought like, well, let's make something so that we can try and see what we can do and do it differently and just not accept the same thing that we've done before in the past as the default way to do it. And now we were also able to do that and really assess the value of festivals and that kind of thing in this process. And I'm saying this because it is important because we've debuted there before, right? Like, I think if
Mhm.
you've never been it would be much harder if I'd never been to TIFF or never been to a big festival to say like, well, I don't necessarily like what, but having been to a few festivals of that were of, larger tier and more regional festivals and had like between the both of us
Yeah.
across numerous projects, you understand kind of what they can help do and what might not be aligned for this project, right? Like, ultimately there are some movies that are festival movies, right? And if you think as a real shot you want to keep swinging because it's going to catch that attention, there's other films that are just not. And as we know, most films that are going to festivals are not going to get streaming and licensing deals and get picked up by this, that, and the third. So
Well, I think that that's a really good point of like, partly because of our experience, we were able to sort of see the reality for what it was, is that, you know, unless it's a very specific kind of movie, there is only a handful of festivals that really, that movies get bought at, right? Like most festivals don't have a huge, ac- you know, activity of like distributors buying the films, right?
purchases, yeah.
And so, I mean, TIFF is one of those festivals. And so if we didn't hit it at TIFF, like if we didn't make a deal at TIFF, it was sort of like, okay, well, we were open to it, right? Like it's not like we had, fully decided we're going to go this route. But because we didn't come out of the TIFF festival with a license in place, or an arrangement with a distributor, I think that that also just helped us kick off of like, okay, so we're going to try this thing that we're very interested in trying, which is
Yeah,
to
I
do it
think
our own way.
as we constantly say, even with people who reached out, which is like, we are not shirking the traditional distribution system.
Mhm.
We just want to partner with people in that system that are down to try, that are like, down to try something different or experience or what have you, right? We didn't really want an experience where it was going to be kind of slotted into a thing and left for dead because, as much as I would love 25,000, 50,000, if you're lucky as an MG being minimum guarantee, kind of thing. Uh, I feel like if we ever use any words that people don't know, just ask us. But I'm not going to pretend like this is film 101 kind of
Yeah.
conversation in general. So, yeah, even if we're lucky enough to get a 25K, 50 mg, something larger or less, right? What would that have materially, truthfully changed for our career in terms of helping us advance to the next thing or what have you, right? Especially if you can't, once you give it over to a distributor or to a platform, you don't know how the platform is going to treat it, when it's going to thing, when it's going to whatever, I remember
Mhm.
like it's yeah, the example that I always think of is, RT had this great show, Utopia Falls, right, which was so awesome, and it was with Hulu, and that's exciting, right, and that's super great, and you're like, "Whoa, this is awesome," and then it debuts on the same day as Zoe Kravitz's High Fidelity. I know which one of those is getting watched and which
Yeah,
one's is
yeah,
not. You know what
exactly.
I mean? And you
Yeah.
don't have any control over that kind of thing, right? So
Mhm.
I think I don't know where I was going with that, to be honest. What was I saying?
Well, we were just talking about, like being open to it, but like, what's the
Oh
actual
yeah,
benefit, right? And like,
being
can
open
you
to it and
guarantee
assessing
that
the real
that's
benefit
actually
of
going to
it.
be the right way, right?
Exactly. And as much as I needed, we would have definitely loved 25 to
Mhm.
$50,000 if in 6, 7 months from now we were going to be in the same place and not have moved the dial, you know what I mean? And like you can have distributor relationships that are not great. So not only you don't have, it's not like you've got a great distributor relationship who wants to now distribute everything that you make. Like all of those were also possibilities kind of thing. And so we
Mhm.
wanted, the thing that I keep saying is like, if we're going to fail, let's fail in new ways. If we're not going to meet the mark, if it's not going to, let's at least get some insight and data for ourselves, right? With this thing that we were able to pull off at this budget level. And realistically, the biggest value to festivals to us is of course exposure and that kind of stuff, but we love attending them. And at $100,000, trust me, if I had 5, 10,000 extra lying around, I would have put it in the movie. You know what I mean? We have to be
Yeah.
strategic on our expenses too, right? So
Yeah.
some of these festivals have really high fees, right? And really slim chances. Do I want to pay €300 for a shot in the dark when for $500 I could maybe do a small print run on something else that we could use to market the film, or I could do a digital, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just starting to assess
100%.
the value of all of that stuff. So that was
And I
kind of
think
what
that
was
that's
informing
really
our choice.
important is like it's the value of it, assessing the real value of it to you, because I can imagine this is not our experience, but I can imagine that there are people who absolutely are not interested in marketing at all, right? And they don't want to do the trailer and they don't want to do the poster and they don't want to do some of the things that a distributor would do, right? But that's not us, right? Like I think you and I are both very interested in those things and want to try new things, like you said, which is for me when you said it became in an instant sort of like mantra for me of like this is the saying that goes above the door in the locker room, right? Of like let's fail in new ways. Let's try
Yeah.
shit. It's not about winning. It's not about being right. It's about not sticking around or like putting our heads in the sand that everything the status quo is working for everybody. It's not,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
somebody's got to crack the code. Maybe they won't, but like I'd rather die trying, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And our, at
So
least our work will at least help get whoever might closer, right?
exactly,
Like if
right? At
it's,
least we can cross things off the list, right?
yes. Yeah.
Okay, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. All that, because I mean, you and I mean, other people as well. It's like, what about this? What about that? Maybe this would work. Like if you ideate and you're kind of interested in it, or like you can, yeah. I mean, it's as much as crossing things off the list as sort of like discovering, process of
Yeah.
elimination, whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but it's good to know whether you have the stomach for that, right? Because it is kind of like a whole nother job,
And
right?
it really is like it's a choose your hard kind of thing.
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
you stomach, if you're with a great distributor whose designer has taste? Awesome. Can
yeah,
you stomach them not really giving a fuck about it and giving you a poster that you could have like you probably did make a better version of in Canva already or something like that? Or,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so there's pros and cons. Like for me, like I think, and as, no, what am I trying to say? The budget level with which we made this movie at made it so that we didn't have, and because, to give Tania her props, definitely was really exacting with managing the budget and our cash flow and that kind of stuff. But we made the film and we're not carrying debt, right? And I think
Mhm.
debt or paybacks or a ton of deferrals kind of thing. We did agree on like a bonus structure for everyone who worked on it with it, because while everyone did get paid, of course not what their normal rates are. So if the film is successful, of course we want the crew and team to be successful, but it's not deferrals. We don't have deferrals with any of
Mhm.
our vendors or anything like that. And so the only reason to us that it would make sense to just take whatever off or to accelerate that would be to kind of bring down debt, right? And to see us quit, like,
Yeah.
because truthfully, but like for a micro budget film of this size, Canadian or not, right? Getting into profit is going to be a real crapshoot. But if you have debt, you have debt, right? It becomes something you have to pay off. So we know we had unencumbered ourselves from that. That's the benefit of this sacrifice, or the challenge of making something at this level. And so because we don't have the debt, like, then what really is the value? If we don't have to pay people, why would I just take $5,000 from you for you to this movie? Like, what is that
Yeah.
really
To
going to
for
take?
us to tie in, right? Like, because
Yeah.
you're giving away the license for a certain amount of time, and sometimes that's like years and years and years, right? Like, there's nothing like if it is just sitting in a graveyard, which so many of these places are, let's be honest, then you can't get it out of the graveyard, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have to be very careful.
And even and so it's like a choose your hard thing. Like
Yeah.
if you're not inclined in that way anyways, overly
Mhm.
creatively or whatever, and you're like, I don't love this poster, but I'm glad these guys are dealing with it and not me kind of thing, then that might be what you want to do. Or there's times where it's like, yeah, we did need some money to pay off a debt. And like, I know we're gonna have to grin and bear it if this doesn't fully go our way, but it's what we need to do kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or on the flip side is the hard you want to choose, like doing it all yourself, right? Which is
Yeah.
also incredibly different. So it really is just
Yeah.
kind of what you have the stomach for. And honestly, it might vary. Like, we have a general ethos of like, independent by design is our preference, but that doesn't say that with a different movie, it wouldn't be completely different, right? The
Yeah.
financial structure of it, the budget level of it, the distributor coming to the table might just like, for what's worth, like, the trailer that we ended up getting for When Morning Comes, when we worked with Photon Films, we had a clip. We didn't have necessarily the resource and capacity to do a trailer. And like, yeah, the trailer that the distributor that we worked with at Photon what got commissioned is incredible. It's a fantastic trailer
It
and
really
not a
is. Yeah.
trailer we would have been able to achieve in the budget or timeline that we had by any way, shape, or form. So there's definitely instances, right, where
Mhm.
it's a thing. I think you're always calibrating, but that's really what you're
Yeah.
choosing between, kind of.
Exactly. And so, like, just moving into what we're actually doing, right? Because we are in charge of the distribution ourselves. Like you said, we're not in debt, right? We're not trying to raise a certain amount of money just to break even, right? Which I think is a real luxury, to be honest. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that we're sitting on like a pile of cash either, right? Like that
Not
there
even
is
a
some urgency for us to make some money. But let's just sort of walk through like the different revenue streams that we've thought of and like maybe what each one is sort of looking like at the moment. Like if we start, there's
Well, I think
theatrical.
before we do that, we should talk, like, just bring us up to date now as to what's happened with distribution so far.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we
okay.
had TIFF. So once we got into TIFF and we kind of had a if this then that, it was a real question mark on certain international festivals. We had submitted through Telefilm's call for entries to a couple of them. Sundance was a big one that we were holding out with. Sundance we really felt like a possible difference marker for this kind of film, this particular stream of independent film kind of thing. The one benefit to the call for entry is that we find out much sooner than December that we didn't get in. So what that helps us do, which I mean, I must say the unfortunate kicker of that is that I think we found out like the day of our premiere was the day that we got the email. But on
Yeah,
the flip side, nothing like getting to premiere your film at TIFF to absorb some bad news. But
yeah, yeah.
we had kind of identified certain films that we thought would be would be real triggers for a different like outcome, right? Or a different plan possibly for the film. Um, and then once we didn't get Sundance, it kind of looked like, okay, we knew that like we were down to play ball with Worldwide and see what we could do. We haven't Our work hasn't had full exposure yet with necessarily like a US distributor or an international distributor. Most of our exposure has been in Canada kind of thing. So leaning on the understanding lever that we had there, but that also means this is where our first audience is. And our goal with the distribution was, yes, of course, eventually to be able to make some money and find out which ways we could do it, but also build an audience, right? And start to captivate and like contain that and kind of let them know what we're doing and what we're up to kind of thing. So we wanted
Uh-huh.
to, so what that meant was once we didn't get into Sundance, we pivoted, or we always had in the back of our mind, a December release, a limited theatrical release in December in Canada, and then doing piloting a kind of limited rental window online in time for the holidays. Leading up to that, what we wanted to do was key festival. We applied to very specific festivals that either we'd been to before that we thought would really be champions of the film if it did get in, as an opportunity to kind of like essentially continue to advertise the film and build that word of mouth thing. We really looked at those festival screenings almost like marketing screenings, because we also knew too that we had made the scrappy indie that a lot of people are trying to figure out how they can put together now for themselves kind of thing. So we revisited St. John's, which is a festival that we've spoken at but had never played at before. And then we got invited by the Regent Park Film Festival there. So, with all of those, we treat it as like, every time we did an intro for the film, it'd be like, please, if you love the film, we're at the Q&A, reminding the audience, like, please rate and review it and stuff like that, because that traction, you look up a film, if you've never heard it before, it already having some reviews or having a thing is all the kind of stuff that you need help with. But oftentimes filmmakers, we just don't have capacity or remember until the time is already too late. And
Uh-huh.
then all of that was up tee us up to our 2 nights at review, which we were able to get, and that was like such a huge win. Again, particularly the review was specific for our goals because of how it aligned. It's a rep theater that shows a lot of kind of indie work, a lot of early work of like some of our favorites, revives stuff as well, but became, because it almost shut down, is such a symbol of like a fight for art and for filmmaking, I think, for so many in the city. And so it was a big deal for us to get those 2 nights there.
Yeah.
And then we had those 2 nights, and then we had we did our test pilots um rental window over the holidays. And so that brings us to where we are now. And at the same time, the another update I'll add is we had been having a conversation with an aggregator, Film Hub, and working with them on what worldwide or international options could make sense for us with self-distributing.
Mhm. Great update. So yeah, so we were doing those 3 sort of pronged approach or whatever you wanna call it, and, you know, we were lucky enough to get some, distribution funding from Telefilm, which was, again, like a huge plus from being able to, get some post-production funding from Telefilm when they
Yeah.
saw that we had something decent. They came on board finally, which was vital. And then that sort of starts to unlock other funds at Telefilm, which is good and bad as a model. But for us at the moment, it's very good.
Yeah.
Um, and so we had
And
some
that
money that
also, like, I mean, that marketing fund coming through is what, like, it helped embolden us to like, make the
yes,
review happen and that kind of stuff, right?
yeah,
Because, we are always operating with a $0 version of the plan, but it's really hard after spending a year not really making any money and doing things for as little as possible, making a film, to try and get like go back again, right, with $0 in hand or not that much, right, and approach the whole thing with in kind. So that
yeah,
marketing fund really helped give us some confidence to really set our plan in motion with review, promoting it, how we want to promote it, getting a social
hmm
media person, all of that stuff. So yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so like in sort of our ambitions for the theatrical to sort of eventize them and sort of make them more of an event. We had a lot of ideas, but I just want to sort of talk transparently about screening fees and what the split is and how much money you can actually make at a screening. So most of the theaters that are at the review level, which let's just call them independent theaters, and not Cineplex, not Landmark, um, they'll do like a 40-60 split or a 35-65 split and you get the 35 or you get the 40. And that's of box office. That's not concession. That's nothing, else included. And of that, sometimes there will be like a minimum guarantee of $250. Right? So that's sort of like the lowest you could expect to do from a screening is $250, guaranteed in a commercial theater. If you're going to a festival or going through universities doing special screenings and sort of considering those to be kind of private screenings, um, they often have a screening fee, and that can also be anywhere between $250 to $1,000. There is
I
a
will
rate
say
card.
2 things, so before you, move forward. The one thing, just to put some, numbers to it. So if you're looking at somewhere, because again, you think of selling out a theater and you're thinking it's tons of money, all that stuff, but at like a theater capacity of 180 or even 200 seats, right, and $14 an average ticket, you're looking at about $2,800 total. That's if you sell out the entire thing. And then it's
Mhm.
a 60-40 split, right? So at best, even if you sold out the thing, that one screening night, you're looking at in $800 to $1,000, right? And of course, not everything is going to sell out and that kind of thing. So it definitely, just to pull it to like our wider understanding of filmmaking, when things are wide release or in tons of theaters or whatever, like it really is like,
Right.
a $20 ticket at a time that accumulates to some of the bigger box office opening weekend numbers that we have. Because even something showing at Cineplex, even if it has 300 seats, right, at $15 to $18 a ticket, with the split still in there, though of course studio networks and all, they have different kinds of splits, but it's not everything, right? And so
Mhm.
when things have limited runs, that does matter. When it's only going to be in 5 theaters, that does, like, sometimes we hear on the flip side with even awards conversations, right? Well, it's, highest to lowest. Denzel and Spike's latest was this thing. People are like, they put this movie nowhere. What are they gonna like? And that, and so it does what we're talking about on a micro scale is exactly what happens on a macro scale. It
Yes.
just is tenfold. And that's how you get to the kind of opening numbers that we have. But theater by theater, even when you're selling it out, right, you're looking at maybe $1,000 a night kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And I would argue that like you have to be very strategic about how you look at that, because you're not just putting it up on the screen and selling it out, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a huge marketing machine to sell out a theater.
Yeah.
Even if that theater is like the only game in town and has a membership like the Review has a very, very loyal audience, right? Like they have a great membership that's very active. That theater, I would imagine, probably is in one of the top of the city in terms of like an independent operator in terms of their audience numbers.
Yeah.
And, like, it doesn't just happen, right? Like, there's a lot of marketing. So to get that $1,000 for that screening, you might have to pay well and above that in marketing, right? So,
Yeah. I
again, that's
mean,
why it's like wide release makes sense, and that's why you're sort of like, having it in multiple theaters and, like, everybody seeing the same marketing, and then you sort of can, like, average it out over those screenings. But in a
y-
case like ours, where we're not doing simultaneous release and it is sort of one at a time, you have to be very careful about how you're marketing and sort of thinking about the investment of your time. So, like in the case of the Review, which those nights were very successful for us and very rewarding, we did a lot to inventize those screenings. And, it cost us money, but it also cost us a lot of time and effort, right? Like, so there was on the team like 3 or 4 different people working real hours to really promote and to do all the things that we had planned on doing.
and
So
just to give you a bit more specific context, for our first night, which I think was 70% sold, we have December nights a 9:30 p.m. screening, which for the reviews, is not necessary, while late for some, for that audience, from their records, right, is still can perform well, but about 70% turnout. And in order, like, we will still have to assess maybe what was the most effective at triggering what, but the number of things that we did to help and get to that, like, I think
Mhm.
between, I think one night was 70% sold, and the other night ended up being closer to 50 or maybe close to
Yeah.
40 after the snow and everything like that. But, we have a moderator doing a Q&A from a different thing that we have. We're bringing in the cast to do the Q&A. We have gone and canvassed the Parkdale area to do restaurant partnerships to try to make this more attractive for people to come out and see the film. We've also been working with our social media person doing posts constantly talking about different things as well. I'm going on the social, like a little nationally broadcasted thing. So it is, I mean, and some of these are hard costs, some of these are not, but between
Yeah.
the time and thing, right? It's not a matter of like, oh, we put the movie there and it just made $1,000, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not how it really translates, which again can't stress enough. This is the benefit of something like the Telefilm Marketing Fund, which can help us again confidently play with these things and insulate. Right, we're still up technically $1,000 because we're not in a it's not an immediately recoupable kind of thing with the fund money. So,
Yeah,
anyways.
exactly. And I mean, to the point that we've, decided how to approach it of like some of this is just recon, right? Like that we are testing things so that we can figure out what works and what doesn't work. Like aside from the human labor to like go out and canvas the area to get the partnerships with the merchants, that was very, very successful, right?
Mhm.
Like that really did result in the kinds of partnerships that we wanted, the free giveaways, the discounts on dinner. It helped us with like a bit of a campaign that we were running around, have dinner and a movie, like have dinner with friends before seeing dinner with friends. That really did work out, and it actually worked out sort of like without a huge heavy lift, but it still was a lot of time and a lot of emails and a lot of negotiating and like, management of new partnerships, right? Like that's all time. That's not free. I mean, or if it is free, there's only a limit of how much you can ask somebody to be working on something that isn't kind of like, well, when you get around to it, it's like, no, no, we have hard deadlines. Like you need to do this today. Um, so yeah, these are the kinds of things that we can roll out or decide not to, like what worked, what didn't. is really is the point, I think, for much of this, but
And
there's
then the
just no
next thing we were
denying.
talking about was the university fees and stuff like that, and it could be anywhere from 250 to 1,000. Technically, you can set them at whatever, right?
Yeah,
If your screening fee is $5,000 or whatever for the film, what we're talking about is the bandwidth of usually what you'll get offered, and most places have
yeah,
available kind of thing. Was to say,
yeah,
some places offer top up if you're bringing guests or going to do a Q&A. I think the educational element of it has is a big draw and has a real appeal, and like universities have some kind of budget, but you can set your screening fee to be whatever. That's usually the bandwidth though that you'll be offering, that most places in the educational space
mm,
have budgeted to be able to offer. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think some it's you like you said, you can always negotiate. There are rate cards available, right, for you to look at as sort of like what the range is, what would be reasonable, but in my mind, I think $1,000 is pretty much the upper limit of a screening fee, and unless it's for a private function or somewhere different where they're really trying to make a meal out of your particular presence there.
Yeah.
But that is also just to mention that so there's screening fees, but then there's also speaker fees. So then, if we do attend and do a Q&A afterwards, and that could be one of us, that could be a cast member, those are also additional fees, right? So, yeah, those also really do add up. And so we've done a number of those already. And it's definitely part of our strategy is to hit all the universities and all the sort of departments that go from production to cultural studies to writing. Like there's multiple departments at every university that has a liberal arts department that is active. There's lots of universities that have film festivals, and that's kind of like the perfect like intersection.
Yeah. And when you consider that, like, again, all the we had a successful turnout, and I think maybe would have made just under 1,000 on our first night after split and everything like that. Versus a university that might invite us a screening fee of, let's say, $700, but they're putting us in front of like very keenly interested potential audience members and fans of our work, people who might be more likely to kind of be more inclined, I should say, to follow what we do next and what we do, because they're up and
Mm.
coming and they might want to shadow on a thing or whatever kind of thing. Because
Mhm.
I think, like, yeah, those university things are continue to be marketed, because oftentimes you're booked to speak with them. Oftentimes they're keenly interested in how you made the thing, and you get to show your self as a creator and filmmaking too, right? A very kind of captive audience that's very interested in your world.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And so, I mean,
I feel like
basically,
we're
I
lagging.
think it's, what was that?
I feel like we're lagging for each other because you're lagging for me.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because you're breaking up a ton, but I think once get the upload, like, it will be clear. At least that's my
Okay.
hope.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Um,
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I do think just to sort of like wrap up the theatrical part of it's a long game, right? The good thing about a film like ours and the kind of theaters that we're playing in, or even if it's universities, is that it's not about sort of like new releases. It's about good films, right? Like
Hmm.
you can have a film that is 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old that will play right before, right after your film at an indie theater, right? So because we think our film sort of fits that category, like I do think it is not something like that will run its course in 6 months and then they're on to the next thing. It's like we can continue to try to be in theaters on an ongoing basis. And so, yeah, I mean, it might not seem like a lot in a short amount of time, but like over time, I think the film will do well and generate quite a bit of revenue in theaters.
Yeah, I think that the toughest reality to reconcile with is that the film could be doing well, and that could mean butt kiss for your life materially, truthfully, right? That, like,
Yes.
you know, there's two kind of versions of success, I think, when it comes, which is the version that we all dream of, which is it's doing so well that I can pay myself for a year or won't have to think, or, like, you know what I mean, when a film's and but by all accounts, right, the film is doing incredibly well, but at our capacity level, and again, we're not operating at a 10 times scale where we can hit 20 theaters in one weekend, right, to accumulate that kind of thing. So it's reconciling and figure out the way that like you can't yet bet on, like, that's not income. It's not income, not even for the
Mhm.
company, not for the thing, right? And like it still needs to accumulate and that'll take time. But in the meantime, you're a living person and you need to pay your bills
Yeah,
and make money. So it is what it is. But yeah.
it is. Yes, definitely, definitely. Um, and so the the next one is the sort of digital distribution. So you mentioned that we've like are in a deal now with Film Hub, which is an
Yeah.
aggregator that sort of reaches out to the all the sort of players, all the streamers, and it does it sort of in 3 phases. It does the transactional VOD, then it does the, SVOD, Hulu, Stars, Netflix, etcetera, and then it goes to if it doesn't get a secured license, a exclusive license with one of those streamers, then it goes to, AVOD, which is the Tubi, the Plutos of the world. And so
Hmm.
we have
Yeah. And that's
right
what we talked
now.
about.
Go ahead.
No, no, you can go ahead. The like, that's all.
Yeah, so where we are in that process is we've done the transactional, so that's ready to go, and it's out right now to look for an exclusive license, at least get an offer, and then the window for that is was surprisingly short. I really liked that actually, that we weren't sort of waiting to hear back. Like they had a schedule that hopefully they would have an exclusive license by the end of February at the latest, and then would be triggering if there was nothing negotiated and or anything that we would accept, that they would go to the Tubies and the Roku, the advertising VOD by May 3rd. So it really does feel like it's happening quite fast. It's not sort of a long process, which I really do appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we could have a whole separate
Hmm.
video on Film Hub and just breaking down because it was like, you know, it's nothing overwhelmingly new in terms of what we learned through the process, but I just think in such a grand, like, understanding even how the value of TVOD versus SVOD versus AVOD and why what comes before and like, that kind of thing, I think has been super um illuminating for us. And like, as we said earlier, in terms of wanted to try new things, like this is the part of it that, like, in the past historically, go the festival route and, if something can happen, it happens and we license it somewhere kind of thing. This part of it feels like we're kind of getting into the mechanics of how these platforms and networks are making decisions and the values of things and stuff like that. So that's really uh yeah, it's exciting to kind of be discovering and gaining better understanding and the language of this world and what this stuff all really means. But yeah, I feel like it'll be interesting how fees will accumulate through that as well too. But yeah.
Yeah, and then the last thing that we're trying is Patreon. Right? And so, like, similar to what you were just saying about, like, even if we're making a bit of money in theatrical, like, it's certainly not enough for us to be collecting a paycheck or taking a paycheck every 2 weeks from the company, um, at least not in the near future, based on that. And so, you know, there's this thing that I sort of really like to think about, or the way I like to view the film now and maybe all the work that we're doing going forward is sort of those we're not just working our ass off in service of those projects, but those projects are working in service of us,
Yeah.
right? Like it's very much like the saying of like if the plane is going down, you should put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your baby. And it does feel like that. That's how I think about these films of like, there are babies, but like we have to look after ourselves first, or there will be no films. There will be nothing, right? Like we can't not make money. We can't not afford to live. And so just making sure that we're not killing ourselves so that, the world gets to see our film. It's more like, no, no, we're filmmakers. We need these films to pay us. We need to make sure that we are um, thinking about our own livelihood and our own survival. And to that end, I think the Patreon is a really interesting like response to that in terms of how can we how can we connect with an audience, right? And make an audience for us. And of course, they're here because of the work, but it's really sort of a long-term relationship with us rather than just sort of like a one-off audience for the projects.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it always like, any good entrepreneur, like, you look at the skills you do have and the value you do have, right? And available for any kind of market. And ultimately, I think we're really eager to share the process of this and the ins and outs
Mhm.
with people, and some of it, like, and also I think, we can break this down, articulate in a way that, like, we're down to be an open book, right? So,
Mhm.
want it to be an exchange for people who are like in similar ethos, right? That are intrigued, curious about how we're making this, or, inspired to try and pursue it themselves and want to know that kind of detail. I think it will, we will have a better industry, if we can all be hopeful and optimistic, but a little bit more clear eyed on kind of what some of this stuff really involves and entails.
Yep, agreed. So yeah, we're early days. Obviously, this podcast is a part of those early days of trying to create content and trying to talk more directly with our audience on Patreon. But yeah, I think it's something we're really committed to and could be one of the ways that we keep ourselves feeling good about making the work and yeah, making a living, to be honest. So we'll see how it goes.
See how it goes.
All
Bye.
right. Bye bye.